Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center ecosystem, from data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities, regardless of where you are in the ecosystem. Maybe you're from an operator like hyperscale, colocation, edge, modular, or wholesale data center provider, or perhaps your company is a technology or a facilities related company that sells to or partners with data center operators or data center end users, or maybe your company gets involved in construction, real estate, or is an investor in data centers, digital infrastructure, or critical facilities. Or perhaps your company provides some kind of outsourced sales and marketing solutions in and around the data center ecosystem. But regardless of what your company's role is, if you're looking to level up, if you're looking to elevate your growth, your team's growth, and your company's growth in and around the data center ecosystem, you're for sure in the right place, regardless of what your role is. Maybe you work in sales, marketing, account management, product, channel partnerships, or perhaps you're the maestro, the orchestra conductor, the leader, executive in chief that is designed, whose goal is to make sure that everyone is sitting in the right seats on the bus, playing at the same tempo, rowing in the right direction to take your company to where it wants to go next in providing great solutions in and around the data center ecosystem. If this is the first time that you're joining us for the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, welcome. If this is your second or third time, or you're a repeat visitor, we're thrilled to have you back. If you have an idea for a upcoming topic challenge that we should address in one of these upcoming shows, feel free to leave that in the comments wherever you're watching, and we'll consider adding that to a queue to one of our upcoming episodes. So what is on the agenda for this week? First, we're going to look at how a colocation, cloud, and connectivity solutions provider can get leads. After that, we'll get into how a data center design, engineering, and project management firm improves its marketing. Then we'll talk about how a hyperscale data center can communicate its value. After that, we'll take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor. And in the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we'll talk about how a data center connectivity provider and its sales team can connect with leads at the right team and at the right time. Then we'll talk about how a data center lighting company improves its marketing and sales to data center facilities. And as we head down the home stretch on this week's live Q&A show, we'll talk about how a data center connectivity and interconnections firm can improve its growth rates. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, make sure that you subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter directly on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. This way you can get notified each Sunday directly to your email inbox about new upcoming events and resources just like this. So without any further delay, let's jump right into this week's first question, which is, how can a colocation, cloud, and connectivity solutions provider get leads? How does a company that provides colocation, cloud, and connectivity get leads, generate more leads? That's a fantastic place to start. And it's one of the most popular questions, one of the most popular requests that we hear about over at the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. So the first thing I want to think about is when you sell colocation, when you sell cloud, and when you sell connectivity, are you able to sell all three of those lines of business to the exact same kind of client? If so, then we can use a single go-to-market strategy, a single go-to-market playbook, and the same team and resources to be able to effectively generate those leads. If those lines of business are only loosely related and you tend to sell them to different kinds of people, either because they're located in a different geographic region, their companies are all different sizes, they're in all different industries, then you have a much more complex go-to-market kind of problem or growth problem that you're trying to overcome. But for the sake of what we're talking about today, let's go with the idea that you have these three lines of business and you have one particular kind of client that you want to sell these to. And because of that, you can use a single go-to-market strategy. You can use a single sales and marketing playbook to be able to generate leads, nurture those leads into opportunities, close those opportunities into new clients, and onboard and retain and upsell and cross-sell those clients over time. So what we want to know for starters is when it comes to generating more of the right leads, where have you been most successful in the past? If we look at your case studies, if we look at your logos, if we look in your CRM at your existing customers and your customer relationship management system, what commonalities will we find when we look at your longest term, most profitable, happiest clients that have, for the most part, enjoyed and benefited from at least two, ideally all three of these lines of business: co-location, cloud, and connectivity? And among the commonalities, we want to try to figure out where they're located. And this is where it starts to get a little bit challenging, because co-location tends to be tied to a specific location, right? You're basically your clients putting servers in your data center facility or facilities. And because of that, you tend to need two different kinds of playbooks: a playbook for clients that are located in very close proximity to one or more of your facilities, or clients that are not. And you can still do business with clients that are not within a 30 or 60-minute drive of your location, but you're going to need a completely different kind of playbook to be able to market and sell digitally, to be able to market and sell virtually. Cloud, by the nature of cloud, it tends to be a lot more born in the virtual world, right? And because of that, geographic proximity doesn't tend to be quite as important. Sure, there's latency issues, there's governance issues, there's compliance and regulatory issues that would dictate that someone would have not just preference, but extreme preference for certain regions or certain geographic locations. But cloud is basically a different kind of business model that opens up a much potentially wider area of addressable market. And connectivity, back to the other extreme. Like, in order to be in the connectivity business, you need to be good at telecommunications and peering and internet exchanges and meet me rooms. And because of that, that tends to be very, very localized, where latency is incredibly important. Proximity is incredibly important. With all of that in mind, we're looking for a Venn diagram to all of this. Think about three circles. Where's the overlap with the perfect kind of clients, the ideal kind of clients that need all three of these from you? And when you've done well with this in the past, we're looking for geographically what these clients have in common. Are they all located in your area? Are they all located within a 30 to 60-minute drive of your region? Are they all located within the same state or province? Are they all located within your country? Are they located within a group of countries within the same continent? Or can they truly be located anywhere around the globe? And anywhere around the globe, most of the time, is going to depend on how large your company is. That's not to say that a single location co-location operator can't have international clients. Many do well with international clients. It's just that in order for your co-location facility, co-location business to have a certain level of sophisticated client, they're almost certainly going to want multi-locations, multiple geographic regions, perhaps multiple clients. So they have geographic diversity, geographic footprint for latency and governance reasons all over the planet. And that tends to be a more complex build out by the nature of it. So be self-aware, figure out where you've done well in the past with your marketing, sales, and most of all, support and retention and account expansion. And get clear about geographically where you're primed to win, both now and in the future. Once you figure out the geographic part of that ideal client profile, and one more sidebar on all of that, as when you look at needing to do or wanting to do business in co-location, cloud, and connectivity globally, recognize that there's a handful of countries where English only is going to be fine. But once you get beyond those handful of countries, you will almost certainly need to localize into different languages. And even in other English-speaking countries, there's some localization that's needed. But for sure, if you're going to aggressively expand, let's say you're based in the US and you want to aggressively expand into Middle East, Africa, Europe, Asia, wherever it is, for the most of the countries that you're likely looking to grow this footprint on will require that you have marketing capabilities, sales capabilities, services capabilities multilingually. In other words, way beyond just English. Second, besides the geographic part of your ideal client profile for generating leads, how big or how small should these companies be? And this is another soul-searching self-awareness, looking at your case studies, looking in your CRM, looking at where you've been most successful in the past with your marketing, sales, services, onboarding, account expansion, cross-selling, retention, net promoter score, all that good stuff. Where have you been most successful? Where have they been happiest? Are they clients that are a certain on the smaller side? Are they mid-market clients? Are they enterprise clients? And because of just how important LinkedIn plays a role in most of your lead generation and account management and prospecting in and around colocation, cloud, and connectivity, I would encourage you to standardize the part of your ideal client profile that has to do with company size based on the ranges of company size, ranges of headcount that LinkedIn uses across the board on its platform, regardless of whether you're looking at like LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Campaign Manager for ads. So for example, when you look at the clients that you've been most successful with, how big do they need to be to afford your minimum levels of purchase, minimum levels of engagement on the colocation, cloud, and connectivity side? Can a 1 to 10 employee company truly be a good fit for you? Or do they need to be at least 11 to 50 employees? Or do they need to be at least 51 to 200 employees? And at the other extreme, is there a certain kind of enterprise that would have such outrageously complex requirements on financials, on compliance, on sales cycle length, on legal, whatever it is, that are just so overwhelming that your company just wouldn't be a good fit for them now? And there should be an upper end of the range for your ideal client profile as well. So for a lot of small to mid-sized companies that are involved in colocation, cloud, and connectivity, maybe the right company size range for you is anywhere from 50 employees to 500 employees or 1,000 employees or 5,000 employees. But make no mistake, for most companies, regardless of your company size, that are involved in colo, cloud, and connectivity, there's an excellent chance that you cannot profitably sell to everyone. And you need to have some guardrails on the company size part of your ideal client profile. And if you're going to scale this successfully, I would encourage you to normalize those ranges, not so much based on your square footage or their square footage requirements or their power requirements, but I'd start by, because it comes down to prospecting and lead generation and lead nurturing and lead qualification, make it simple on yourself and just simply standardize based on the employee headcount ranges that LinkedIn uses: 1 to 10, 11 to 50, 51 to 200, 201 to 500, 501 to 1,000, 1,001 to 5,000, 5,001 to 10,000, and 10,000 plus. And yeah, you can tell by virtue of the fact, an absurd amount of campaigns that I've done on the platform of the last 10, 12 years or so on Sales Navigator and Campaign Manager, and using it as a research tool. But the good part is a lot of things on LinkedIn have changed over time. That's remained remarkably consistent. The next category actually has changed over time, the industry part of your ideal client profile. And the reason that this is especially relevant, the industry, the vertical, the niche market, why it's especially relevant for a company in colocation, cloud, and connectivity, is when it comes to certain geographic regions, there's certain compliance, accreditation requirements, certification requirements that come up that are unique not only to a specific geographic region, but are unique to specific kinds of industries. For example, like in the United States, as in many regions around the world, healthcare, information technology is very highly regulated. Financial services information technology, very highly regulated. Government, education, all very highly regulated. So what that means is if your company has made the investments and has the resources to be able to check off the boxes, to comply with requirements, to be able to successfully sell to healthcare clients, financial services clients, government clients, whatever it is in your particular region, great, fantastic. Include that in your ideal client profile on specific industries that are great for generating leads within. Conversely, if you know that there's certain industries where your company has not made those kinds of investments, and at some point you're going to be disqualified from their process, why waste time with creating awareness and educating and building trust and generating leads when you know you're not going to be able to close and retain those kinds of clients successfully? So include those as well as specific exclusions of the kinds of industries that should be excluded from your ideal client profile. Where do the inclusions and exclusions come into play? Well, for example, if you're using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, when you're setting up your filters and your saved searches on both the contact level and the account level, you can do inclusions and you can do exclusions. Along the same lines, if you decide to use LinkedIn Campaign Manager to run ads, same deal. You can do inclusions and exclusions based on certain kind of industries, along with geography, along with company size, what they call headcount. Along the same lines, once you get beyond seeing LinkedIn as basically your operating system for lead gen for a colo, cloud, and connectivity company, think about your website, think about your lead generation forms. For each of your most important segments, they probably deserve some real estate on your homepage, right? They probably each deserve a separate page on your website that talks about what you do for them. They also likely deserve some real estate on your top navigation and bottom navigation menus, directing visitors in a really prominent place to those pages. And of course, if you want to be able to turn more of those strangers into visitors, you'll also want lead generation and lead nurturing offers that are unique to that specific kind of industry, unique to that kind of segment within your addressable market, within your ideal client profile. So that's where the rubber meets the road between your ideal client profile and building that out into both traffic generation, lead generation, and having content, educational resources throughout the full buyer's journey, awareness, consideration, and decision, not just at the decision stage where they're ready for sales contact, because at that place, a simple website page may do the trick, but we want to make sure that we have the ability to earn their trust, educate and build trust with them throughout the full buyer's journey. So we need those great educational resources that are specific to that particular industry and specific stakeholders within those companies. So when it comes to generating leads for colocation, cloud, and connectivity, first think about the company. That's your ideal client profile, geography, headcount, and industry that we were just talking about. From there, you should be able to build out a target account list of anywhere from a couple dozen to a couple thousand companies, usually a couple hundred, somewhere in between, of the perfect companies that ought to know that you exist and do business with your company in the future. But we're not done when we've nailed the company side of lead generation and the company side of your go-to-market. We also need to think about the individual stakeholders within those companies that have a big say on where they purchase colocation, cloud, and connectivity from. Those are the individual buyer personas, and those are the people where we need to generate leads. So within those companies, we need to be able to carve up, we need to be able to segment who are the most important people that have the biggest economic say, the biggest economic stakeholders in deciding where they're going to buy colo, cloud, and connectivity. The most important economic stakeholder we're going to call your primary buyer persona. And they'll for sure have a big role on the decision-making committee. The second most important category of stakeholder we're going to call your secondary buyer persona. And that person will also have a major role on the decision-making committee, but they may not necessarily be the be-all, end-all decision maker. In a much larger accounts, much more complex sales, you may have a tertiary decision maker who has somewhat of a role, but not nearly as big of a role as your primary and your secondary buyer personas. And once we have designated who those folks are, we need to do some research and figure out what's going on in their world. What are their biggest goals and what are their biggest challenges in their own words when it comes to anything and everything having to do with colocation, cloud, and connectivity. We can't just assume that we know what they care about and what's driving them nuts and what they're trying to figure out that's standing between them and a promotion at work. We need to actually do the work, do the research, talk to them face to face on Zooms, do surveys, study their LinkedIn profiles, study what shows up in search footprint when we put in their name and their company name. We need to get consensus on their biggest professional goals and their biggest professional struggles. And once we have that, then we're in a great position to create our lead generation strategy that focuses on what's top of mind for them. Not what you'd like to be top of mind, but what actually is top of mind. And we need to be self-aware enough and humble enough to recognize that it's very possible that co-location and cloud and connectivity is not the first place on their journey that they need help with. It's not their biggest challenge right now. It's not their biggest goal. If we think about a typical buyer's journey that has 28 steps between complete stranger and purchase decision, and it's reasonably evenly distributed, with some of those steps being in awareness and some of the steps being in the middle of the funnel at consideration and some of the steps being decision stage, we need to acknowledge that there's a really good chance that it's going to be at least mid-funnel, at least mid-buyer's journey before they're going to start thinking about co-location and cloud and connectivity. So we need to understand for those specific kind of buyer personas in that kind of company, what is the leading indicator that a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or maybe even a couple months down the road, that they're going to be a perfect fit for being a great sales opportunity for your company's co-location, cloud, or connectivity. And the better job we do at that, the more relevant our lead generation campaigns are for what they care about. Not what you'd like them to care about, but what they actually care about. That's the key to relevance, is we need to get a lot more client-centric, understand what's going on in their world, and show up with lead generation content, lead generation offers that educate and build trust with the most important kind of economic stakeholders in these target companies, who at some point are going to be incredibly interested in co-location, cloud, and connectivity. So that's how a co-location, cloud, and connectivity solutions provider can generate more of the right leads. What is our next question? By the way, if you're getting good value from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you hit the like button. Next question up is, how does a data center design, engineering, and project management firm improve its marketing? How does a data center design, engineering, and project management firm improve its marketing? I think the first place to start is to drive home the idea that marketing a data center design, engineering, and project management firm is, by definition, needs to be done quite differently today than it was as recently as 10 years ago. Why 10 years ago? Is it having to do with artificial intelligence and high performance computing and high density? That's certainly part of it. For sure, there's utility power constraints, there's regulatory issues that all come into play when it comes to data center design, engineering, and project management. But it's even bigger than that. 10 years ago, for that kind of company, for a data center design, engineering, and project management firm, if you did everything right with your marketing and building a brand and your lead generation, you could count on the fact that your best prospects and clients would be willing to have a conversation, an initial conversation with someone from your sales or business development team when they were about halfway through their research and decision-making process. 10 years ago, there was research, the prevailing research that most people in the space paid attention to was from CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, who's now owned by Gartner. And at the time, doing some research with Salesforce and Sirius Decisions, they found that 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before sales contact, was over before vendor contact. That meant they were 56% of the way through figuring things out before someone was willing to take a meeting with an account executive or a business development rep or sales development rep from a company like yours. And that wasn't too bad, because what that meant is you still could have a role in the final 44% of how they looked at their available options in front of them for data center design, engineering, and project management. However, and this is a huge however, 10 years of digital transformation, millions of baby boomers retiring, the baby boomers that have not yet retired being a lot more digitally inclined, and a lot more of the decision making now happening with Gen X and millennials and Gen Z. On top of that, tens of millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s and millions of people continuing to work from home. And that 56% number has jumped all the way to 83 over the last 10 years. 83%. What does that mean? 83% of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you in the room, without that prospect or client wanting to spend any time with a member of your sales team. And wow, has that been a massive challenge for so many in the data center ecosystem, especially data center design, engineering, and project management firms. But it also opens up an enormous opportunity for those firms, those companies in the space who recognize that the world has changed, that recognize that the self-driven, self-guided buyer's journey is now the predominant buyer's journey. And the way back into earning a seat early and often on their side of the table is to shed the traditional labels of being seen as business development reps, sales development reps, and account executives that are just focused on a sale, and instead show up with the vibe, with the positioning of being seen more as a teacher, as a consultant, as a subject matter expert, and even as a trusted advisor. And the most highly experienced members of your team may even be seen as thought leaders when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center design, data center engineering, and data center project management. And for a lot of companies, this may be a natural thing. For others, it changes the nature of who you hire. It changes the nature of how you approach learning and development, workforce redevelopment, skills development, cross-skilling, upskilling, cross-training. Because going forward, the companies that are winning and going to continue to win will increasingly be the ones that figure out who their target accounts are, who the people are in these target accounts that matter most, really deeply understand what's going on in those buyer personas world, in those individuals' world, their biggest professional goals and challenges when it comes to projects related to data centers, data center design, data center engineering, and data center project management, and make a concerted effort to show up early and often in a professional development context. So your client-facing team members look more like Big Four consultants and less like a vendor who's trying to sell a data center design, a data center engineering, a data center project management opportunity, get a deal closed. We need to flip this, because in a typical journey through awareness to consideration and consideration to decision, think about 28 touch points that person's going to progress through. Our goal is to get your company, your client-facing team members, to have a role in as many of those 28 touch points as possible. And not just as a vendor, but as an educator, as a consultant, as a trusted advisor, as a subject matter expert. So your most important buyer personas in these accounts are highly motivated to want to spend time with members of your client-facing teams. Because when they're motivated to want to spend time with members of your client-facing teams in that kind of context, they also tend to be highly motivated to your simple overtures that, like, hey, Bob, hey, Sue, I noticed that you registered for our Lunch and Learn next Thursday on data center commissioning best practices or data center design best practices. We know typically on this kind of project, it takes a village. Typically, there's stakeholders involved from design, from engineering, from finance, from compliance, from private equity. So with that in mind, who else from your team should also attend? Who else would benefit from also attending? You'd be shocked at how that simple message that's focused on getting them to spread your educational event, your webinar, your downloadable planning guide, your worksheet, your research report, whatever it is, to the other members of the decision-making team. That's how you find out a lot of times who else is involved in that decision-making capability, because as you look down at your registration roster, as you look down at your CRM, whatever you're using, you start to see, oh, that's really interesting. There's like 5 people from the same company that just registered to get access to this resource, that were just registered to attend this event. Wow, they're talking about us. That's awesome. That's how you meet the decision committee early and often. And when you provide great value, guess what happens when you invite them to next month's or next quarter's event? They want to come back and they want to bring more people from the team with them because they're learning so much. And when you're doing that well, you know what tends to happen? They don't have a lot of time to spend with your competitors anymore. And there's no reason for them to spend time with your competitors anymore because they're learning so much from you. So not only are you nearly guaranteeing your place on the short list when you do this well, you're starving the oxygen supply out from other competitive alternatives in the marketplace. And needless to say, as teams learn together and grow together, you're the one that's helping to dramatically shape the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the different options that are in front of them for data center design, engineering, and project management. So to say that this can have a major impact on how they navigate the journey and ultimately the company that they choose to partner with, that they choose to hire, is like the understatement of the decade. The companies that are doing this well at a world-class level are just going to completely crush this. The good news is the data center design and engineering firms and project management firms haven't tended to be the earliest of adopters in the data center ecosystem. Just now, I'd say in the last 12, 18, 24 months, they're starting to catch up a little bit. But the reality is the data center operators and the data center technology companies have been running this kind of playbook really, really well for 10 or 15 years. For some bizarre reason, companies in data center construction and real estate felt that their buyers were special and that they don't use smartphones or watch YouTube videos or listen to podcasts or attend webinars or go on LinkedIn. The reality is the moment they start to do their buyer persona research and customer insight research, like, oh yeah, we missed that. They're for sure active. If they're in charge of a digital transformation project, they're for sure active on LinkedIn. Of course, they're learning from looking things up on social and search and asking their peers questions and watching peers questions and attending webinars and in some cases, speaking at webinars and guesting on podcasts and watching other people's podcasts. Of course, they're learning from that. And that's when people have the like aha moment that, oh, like, yeah, we need to catch up here. This isn't the time to just put the pinky toe in the pool. When it comes to marketing, I think one thing that also goes hand in hand is a lot of people want to talk about branding and building a brand. And the reality is, just like 10 years ago, you could still be in for half of the journey, and now you're in for only a tiny part of the journey if you don't show up differently. 10 years ago, a data center brand was owned by a creative director who had like a PhD in Adobe Creative Suite. And because of that, they tended to control everything. Today, that's a very dangerous proposition in a client-driven world because sure, the logos and the color charts and the fonts for sure make a difference. Aesthetically, images and videos, that's all very, very important. But your brand today is so much more than that. Your brand is everything that the marketplace says about your client-facing team members and your company when you're not in the room. And given that your client-facing team members are not in the room for very much of the journey anymore, it is your educational resources, your educational events that need to do the heavy lifting for you, and that in many ways take the place of what used to happen in face-to-face conversations for prospects and clients of data center design, engineering, and project management. So to say that this matters is really, really an understatement. And what's so dangerous for so many companies in this space is I still see an enormous amount of the annual budget being invested in these huge national and global conferences where, sure, for a couple of days, you have hundreds or thousands of people that are devoting 90% of every waking hour to being at this conference. But the problem is, no matter how amazing the party is that you threw, no matter how epic that charity golf tournament is that you sponsored, each of those is just one or two touch points. What about what happens after the conference when they go back to work the next day, when they recover from the conference hangover and they realize that, oh, there's other priorities, and it may be a couple of weeks, it may be a couple of months before data center design and engineering and project management is back on the front burner for them. How are you going to stay in touch? Sure, you could depend on your account executives, your sales development, your business development reps to do regular follow-ups, but that gets old after a while. Just, hey, when can we meet? I want to come in and pitch you. Hey, we just won an award. I should come in and pitch you. We're entitled to come in and pitch you because we won an award. We just opened a new facility. We just hired all these great people. Come on, you want us to come in and pitch you? That gets really, really old really fast. The way to stay in front of your best prospects and clients is as an educator, as a teacher, as a consultant, as a trusted advisor, as a subject matter expert, which almost certainly requires making sure that you don't overly invest too much of your resources on these huge, massive national and global conferences. Yeah, for sure, there's definitely some that are worthwhile. But what I would encourage you is when you're making your decisions on where to allocate resources, on one side of the screen, pull up their prospectus, their media kit that talks about their demographics from last year's conference and their anticipated demographics that are going to attend this year's conference. And on the other side of the screen, pull up your ideal client profile. And I want you to use that discipline on every single one of your major conference investments going forward, because you'd be shocked that simple compare of what's on your ideal client profile versus what's in their media kit, you're going to discover some pretty big gaps. And sure, every once in a while, if there's a couple hundred or couple thousand people, a needle in a haystack where 90-95% of their attendees are completely disqualified, but one or two that completely mattered are going to be there, and you think that's the only way you're ever going to get a meeting with them because apparently JetBlue and Hampton Inn and things like that are completely off your playbook for next year. Like you've never thought of, for a lot less than the 80,000 or the 250,000 or whatever it is that we're spending at this conference, we could go out to visit them 2, 3, 4 times over the next year, and it would still be way more impactful and way more cost effective. And I bet if we went out to visit them, we could for sure get 30 or 60 minutes of uninterrupted time with them to talk through this challenge, as opposed to having to beg for 3 minutes of undivided concentration at a noisy cocktail party or on a noisy expo floor or something like, oh, we got a suite. Yeah, the suite just ratchets up the cost. And guess what? They're going to your suite and 20 other suites. You're having to share that attention with the 19, 20, 1,500, 2,000 other companies that are very, very motivated to want to have that meeting as well. But at the end of the day, for companies that want to improve its marketing for data center design, data center engineering, and project management, the goal is to show up in front of the right people, in the right places, at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. So your company is seen as the be-all, end-all experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center design, engineering, and project management. If you are speaking in one of the editorial slots at a conference, you may be just fine with this. However, the reality is so many of the speaking slots, just like so many of the article slots in the media companies and the events companies, have turned into pay to play, that it's a dicey proposition for whether you can actually get the kind of mind share that you're looking to get at other people's events. That's why I see so many companies that are pushing back and saying, instead of paid media and instead of earned, let's focus on building our own media, our own podcasts, our own webinars, our own lunch and learns, our own breakfast conferences, our own breakfast seminars. And the reality is, if you have a space in your own facility, if you have a Zoom account, a StreamYard account, whatever it is a lot easier to get into this than you likely realize. The hardest part, many times for most companies, is there's a massive amount of cultural inertia that is vehemently resisting change. The reality, though, is most of your clients are likely counting on your expertise to lead these transformation projects around data center design, engineering, and project management. They're not asking you to design the same data center or engineer the same data center that you did 5 or 10 years ago. That's for sure in the rearview mirror. AI, high performance computing, supercomputing has complete and power capacity, grid capacity limitations, regulatory issues, density issues have completely changed how you go about design engineering and project management. So why are you thinking that your prospects and clients haven't also changed and don't need you to lead the change? Do you want to be reactive to change, or you want to be out in front of change? If you're serious about being out in front of change and having your company and your client-facing team members be seen as the be-all, end-all experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with design, engineering, and project management, this is the playbook to use going forward if you want to improve your marketing, is showing up in a way that with the right people over an extended period of time positions your company as the be-all, end-all experts on educating and building trust with the most important buyer personas in these kinds of companies that at some point in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, maybe even it's a little longer out, are going to be the perfect clients for your company's design, engineering, and project management services. That's how I would approach how a data center design, engineering, and project management firm can improve its marketing. If you're enjoying this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you help to spread the love and hit the like button on whatever platform you're watching. Next question up is, how does a hyperscale data center communicate its value? How does a hyperscale data center communicate its value? That's an interesting question. The reason it's so interesting is when it comes to hyperscale deals, they're massive in scale. It's very rare that you would sell anything in the context of even being a subcontractor to a subcontractor for hyperscale, and it wouldn't be a huge deal to start with. So for communicating value, we really need to understand what business your company is truly in for that particular kind of prospect, for that particular kind of client. A lot of companies don't truly understand what business they are really in. When it comes to understanding what you really do and the biggest value that your ideal clients are getting from you, I would encourage you to think like a product manager. The job of a product manager, not a project manager, but a product manager, is to spend time with your ideal clients, understand their biggest goals and challenges and what they can't get done with today's solutions, and work with your internal resources to help build products and services that close the gap between what they want and need and what you're able to provide in a way that's focused on what your company is trying to do with its mission, vision, values, and its short-term, intermediate, and long-term growth goals. So when you put that product manager hat on, we're trying to focus on the job to be done, JTBD. This was a framework that was popularized during the 2010s by the late Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard Business School. But a lot of the roots with this started even 10 years before that with the lean startup movement out in Silicon Valley with folks like Steve Blank and Eric Ries in SaaS companies. And the idea was to get obsessively close to your clients and prospects in a way that you truly understand what's going on in their world, how they're getting things done today, what they're not happy with, and how you're going to close the gap on that. And the more rapidly you can iterate these cycles to continue improving and improving and improving to get closer and closer to what they truly want, the faster your company can grow. So there's a lot that even hyperscale data centers can learn from looking at the broader B2B, mid-market, and enterprise technology, enterprise software as a service kinds of companies. These are frameworks that a lot of infrastructure as a service, IaaS companies, kind of like as the first cousin of platform as a service and software as a service, have already adopted. So when it comes to communicating your value, you first need to understand for your ideal clients what they actually value most in their own words. What's going on in their world that they need to achieve professionally? What are their biggest individual goals that sit in their job description, that sit in their objectives and key results? What sits in their team's goals and what sits in their company's goals that's directly related to hyperscale digital infrastructure? That's the goals that they need to achieve to be successful in their job, to earn bonuses, to earn promotions. We also need to be very mindful of what's driving them nuts, what their biggest challenges are, what their biggest stressors are, what their biggest frustrations are, that are screwing with their work-life balance, that are messing in some cases with their mental health, that are threatening their career trajectory, and that are just plain driving them nuts, that just totally grind their gears when it comes to hyperscale data centers. And to the extent that you know the consensus on their biggest professional goals and their biggest professional frustrations, you're on the right path to understanding what value you can actually provide and how that should be communicated. Because from our standpoint at DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, when it comes to your website copywriting, when it comes to your product marketing materials, when it comes to your sales enablement, email marketing, digital ads, social media posts, basically your entire go-to-market strategy, your sales and marketing playbooks, that needs to largely be governed by strict discipline on defining your ideal client profile, a strict understanding, a precise understanding of your segmentation strategy within that ideal client profile, who the buyer personas are, and what their biggest goals are and what their biggest challenges are in their own words, to jump into doing website copywriting or anything similar to that without having those well-researched buyer personas in front of you. That's where you start running into resonance problems. Things aren't relevant, things aren't resonating, where there's market message mistakes, mishaps, misfires with all of that. But the flip side is when you're intensely focused on who they are and what they care about, their biggest goals and challenges in their own words, it becomes a lot easier to understand what your value is and how you actually want to communicate that value. And sure, of course, your ideal client profile needs to be well thought out for your current capabilities. Geographically, their company size, their industries, it for sure needs to match up with your business model, what you do well, your current capabilities, and what's on your near-term roadmap for 3 to 6 months down the road. And for sure, you need a deep understanding of who the most important economic stakeholders are, who shows up on the decision committee when it comes to deciding anything and everything having to do with hyperscale that your company provides, your products and services. But at the end of the day, all value is subjective. All value is in the eye of the beholder. And it's incredibly important to align around your most important economic stakeholders' perception of what they value most, and make sure that you're building your roadmap and communicating that around what they care about in their own words, not what you'd like those words to be, but what those words actually are. That's why being client-centric, being channel partner-centric, and getting really, really close to who they are and what they care about is incredibly important for communicating your value, regardless of what you do in the data center ecosystem for digital infrastructure for critical facilities. Now, for hyperscale data centers, where the unit economics are outrageously large, there's so much at stake that this is not the time to cut corners. This is where you want to go really, really deep on truly understanding who they are at an account level, at a company level, and who they are at an individual level, and make sure that you're making adequate levels of investment to educate and build trust with them and earn your way in early and often so you can stay with the most important stakeholders for hyperscale data centers throughout their full buyer's journey. If you're just counting on these decision makers, these decision-making committee members showing up to a national conference, a global conference, and getting some face time with them there, it's entirely possible that you're either too early or too late. The only way to get the timing truly right is to have a way to stay with them on an extended, concerted basis throughout the full buyer's journey, and to make it worth their while to want to spend time with you. So instead of your account executives, your sales development reps spending all of their efforts nagging these poor folks to take a meeting with you, the flip side happens. The most important stakeholders at these companies who would buy your hyperscale related products and services are actually now motivated to want to spend time with your client-facing team members because they're learning so much from them, because you've made the big cultural changes, the big investments to say, you know what? We are tired of being treated like crap by our prospects and clients. We're better than that. We have some of the smartest people on the planet on our team. And going forward, we need to let the world know about that. So going forward, we don't have account executives and sales development reps anymore. We have advisors, we have consultants, we have trainers, we have solutions experts, whatever you want to call it. There's so many better. I'm not telling you should immediately go into your email signature and business card and LinkedIn profile and change the job titles overnight. These are bigger cultural changes. But at the end of the day, the account executive of the future should look a lot more like a Big Four consultant and a lot less like the transaction-focused account executive from 10 years ago. The account manager of the future should look like the MBA or the PhD level version of the Big Four consultant instead of the traditional account manager or customer success manager that you would have hired 10 years ago. This is the way that you earn your way in early and often with the right people in the right places at the right time. And most of all, in the right context, So they see your client-facing team members as some of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to anything and everything having to do with hyperscale data center solutions. So when it comes to how hyperscale data centers can communicate their value, recognize that competitive positioning, recognize that differentiation has massively changed. The bar has been raised enormously over the last 5 or 10 years as people have shifted from spending half of the journey with you to spending now very little of the journey with you, unless you're able to get actively involved in their professional development process in learning and development. So this changes the nature of how you allocate resources, how you make your investments going forward. And make no mistake, if you're burying your head in the sand and ignoring all of this, your best prospects and clients are learning from someone. The question is that someone shaping the buying criteria that those prospects and clients use to navigate all of the hyperscale solutions choices that are in front of them? So the question is, do you want your direct competitors, your indirect competitors, to be the ones that are shaping your prospects and clients' buying criteria? Or do you want your client-facing team members to be in the driver's seat, to be in on as many of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and hyperscale purchase decision as possible? Again, these are big culture changes. The choice is ultimately yours, but that's how I would approach how a hyperscale data center can communicate its value. We're going to take a quick break for a message from our sponsor, and we'll be back with 3 more of the biggest challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center ecosystem.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey there, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and you are tuned into this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. If you're getting good value out of this week's show so far, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you have an idea for a challenge, for a topic or a question that you'd like to see us address in an upcoming show, feel free to leave that in the comment section wherever you're watching or listening to this show, wherever you're listening to this episode from, and we'll consider adding it to the queue for an upcoming show. So what's up next for this week? Next question, next topic up is how a data center connectivity provider's sales teams can connect with leads on the right team and at the right time. How a data center connectivity provider's sales team can connect with the leads on the right team and at the right time. That is a terrific question, and I'm so glad that you asked it. And in order for a company that's in the connectivity business to be successful with spending time with connecting with leads that are from the right teams and at the right time, we need to get really good at defining our ideal client profile and really successful at segmentation within that account to understand who the most important stakeholders are and what they care most about when it comes to data center connectivity. So the first place we need to start is by making sure that we have a well-defined ideal client profile. And the way we tackle that ideal client profile is understanding historically where you've been the most successful. This will show up on your case studies page. It'll show up in your logo. It'll show logos on your website. It'll show up in your CRM, your customer relationship management system. What kinds of companies have been most successful buying your data center connectivity in the past? And we need to figure out what they have in common, because that's a huge part of being able to scale your go-to-market playbook, being able to scale your lead generation, your lead nurturing, basically your whole growth plan. What do these companies have in common at the company level, at the account level? Geographically, where do they tend to be located? Are they all located within a certain metropolitan area, within a certain state? within a certain province, within a group of states or provinces, depending on where you have geographic footprint? Are they all located within a certain country? Are they located within multiple countries, all within the same continent? Or can you truly sell data center connectivity globally? If you can sell it globally, more than likely, not only do you have to have marketing and sales and services capabilities, but you're almost certainly going to need marketing and sales and support talent that is multilingual, that speaks multiple languages, that is able to localize your marketing and sales and services assets, especially important for a self-driven buyer's journey. In addition to the geographic part of your ideal client profile, we need to understand for the companies that have been happiest with your data center connectivity, how big are they or how small are they? We need to get really tight on that band that defines their company size. You could do this in annual revenue. You could do that in turnover. However, if you're going to use LinkedIn as kind of like your part of an extension of your CRM, as like almost like your business growth operating system, you probably want to standardize and normalize based on how LinkedIn defines company sizes by its headcount, regardless of whether you're using regular LinkedIn, premium LinkedIn, LinkedIn Campaign Manager, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. They all tend to use the same bands, the same ranges, like 1 to 10 employees, 11 to 50 employees, 51 to 200, 201 to 500, 501 to 1,000, 1,001 to 5,000, 5,001 to 10,000, or 10,000 plus. So when it comes to your data center connectivity, how big does a company need to be to afford your minimums? Probably that knocks out 1 to 10 in a lot of cases. It may knock out 11 to 50. Only you can answer that question. At what point is a company, as an account, so large that the requirements may be so complex that your company just can't adequately service them today? Maybe that's 10,000 plus employees. Maybe it's 1,000 plus employees. So perhaps you determine that within your ideal client profile, you know geographically where they're located, and now you know, for example, maybe they should be from a company that has at least 50 employees, but no more than 1,000 employees or no more than 5,000 employees. Now we're making progress for our lead generation, for our lead nurturing, for our targeting, for who your sales team should be having these conversations with around data center connectivity. Aside from where they're located geographically, and aside from how big or how small their companies are, let's also think about what industries they tend to be located in. Sometimes with connectivity, there's some compliance issues, there's some certification issues that come up that are unique to like healthcare or financial services or government or education or something like that. However, usually a lot of the compliance issues tend to come up at a national level. But again, depending on where you're located, there could be certain industries that are an especially good fit for your capabilities today. And there could be some industries that are a terrible fit for your current capabilities today. So if that's the case, within your ideal client profile, you may want to specifically mention these industries are a fantastic fit and these industries are a terrible fit, and we should instantly disqualify if they come from one of these, because that industry targeting will show up when you do outbound. It'll show up in ads campaigns. It should show up on drop-down lists in your lead generation forms. The inclusions, the preferred industries should for sure have some real estate on your website homepage, on your website navigation. They probably should each have their own page on your website. They probably should each have their own lead generation and lead nurturing offers, perhaps even their own marketing and sales team members. So when it comes to how a data center connectivity provider's sales teams can connect with leads at the right team and at the right time, let's get really specific about, at the account level, at the company level, where we want to reach. Second, within those companies, who are the right people? Who are the buyer personas? Who's the most important economic decision maker that we want to connect with? That person we're going to call the primary buyer persona. Who's the second most important kind of stakeholder in those accounts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center connectivity? That's going to be our secondary buyer persona. And again, knowing these buyer personas not only is incredibly important because we need to do research to understand what's going on in their world, their biggest goals and challenges in their own words, so we can make sure all of our website copywriting, sales enablement, product marketing, email marketing, ads, social media, events strategy should all focus on their biggest goals and challenges in their own words, prioritized by your primary and your secondary most important stakeholders, your primary and secondary buyer personas. Those are the right people that are sitting on the right teams. In terms of the right time, we need to also understand that besides being specific about the account level people and the individuals within those accounts, we need to talk about timing, because the nature of timing is a moving target that shifted quite a bit over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, you could count on the fact that most of your best prospects and clients, most of your best leads were willing to meet with someone from your sales team when they were about halfway through their research and decision-making process. So even though you were excluded half of the time, you were still included roughly half of the time. At the time, 10 years ago, most people pointed to research from CEB, the corporate executive board that's now owned by Gartner, where they found that 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before sales contact, was over before vendor contact. So even though it was 56% over, you could still spend 44% of the time with them. However, those days, those nostalgic days are now very much in the rearview mirror. Add in 10 years of digital transformation, millions of baby boomers retiring, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and much more decision-making roles, tens of millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s, millions of people continuing to work from home, and digital transformation has really dramatically changed buyer preferences, so much to the point that the journey is not 56% of the way over before you meet prospects today. Today, it's 83% of the way over, meaning 83% of their researching, comparing options and evaluating pricing now happens without you in the room. That's research from Gartner. What that means is you're only in there for the final 17% if you don't do something better, if you just are reactive about all of this. However, the companies that are winning are recognizing that there actually is still a way to get in early and often to have a significant role in influencing that 83%. So you're invited in to their side of the table so that you're seen more as a teacher, a consultant, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, maybe even a thought leader. And that's the unlock with all of this, is that for data center connectivity, if your sales team wants to connect with leads on the right teams at the right time, we need to understand that their preferences, their journey is very, very different today than it was as recently as 10 years ago. And now your account executives, your sales development reps, your AEs and your SDRs, they need to show up looking a lot more like teachers and consultants and subject matter experts and trusted advisors, and less just focused on closing a transaction around data center connectivity. So we need to figure out a way for you to not only understand the company and the individuals, but what's their biggest professional goals and their biggest frustrations that they're trying to figure out. So we show up as professional development. So we have an active role in the learning and development process for the key people on these teams. So they're motivated to want to spend time with members of your client-facing teams, as opposed to you having to beg them and nag them and manipulate them into taking meetings. When we do this right, they're highly motivated to want to learn from your client-facing team members. They're also going to be highly motivated to bring their peers with them, to bring their boss with them, to bring other team members with them to your educational webinars, your educational events, to consuming your educational resources. Because when you're focused on providing value to them based on the goals that they've articulated in their own words, based on the challenges that they've expressed in their own words, it's a much more natural ask to say, hey, Bob, I noticed that you downloaded our report to the 10 biggest mistakes people make with data center connectivity. Oh, we know when it comes to connectivity, it takes a village. Typically, there's team members involved from infrastructure, engineering, telecommunications, network operations, cybersecurity, finance. So with that in mind, who else could benefit from reading this? Who else should benefit from watching this, from attending this? You'd be shocked when you do this well and you're providing a lot of value. When you look down at your lead conversion notifications, when you look down at your CRM, whatever you're using to track the lead generation, you're like, whoa, 5 people, 7 people, 12 people from the same company just converted on our landing page in the last 60 minutes, 90 minutes. Holy smokes, this is working. They're talking about us. And that's the first domino to fall to starting to understand who's on the decision committee, who all those stakeholders are. And they're learning together. So they're going to grow together. And you're at the center of their world as the teacher that they're all listening to. This is how you have an amazing impact on shaping the criteria that they're going to use going forward with all of the options that are in front of them when it comes to data center connectivity. So for a data center connectivity provider sales team that wants to connect with leads on the right teams and on the right time and at the right timing, it's very important to recognize that for the most part, there's going to be dozens of touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. And just trying to get in there for one or two of them is not going to cut it anymore. That's why so many companies that are over-investing a huge percentage of their overall budget in these massive national and global conferences, that's why they're finding it so challenging, because they're spending too much on one or two touch points and they don't leave much left for the other 26 touch points. The slow and the steady, the ones that are able to get in there early and often, repeatedly, over and over and over again. So you're building a relationship with multiple stakeholders from that company, through on the decision makers, over and over and over again, through the decision-making committee, over and over and over again, coming back to continue to learn from you about anything and everything that has to do with their biggest goals and challenges at the intersection of data center connectivity. Those are the companies, those are the sales teams that are being set up to win in today's hyper-competitive marketplace. So that's how I would approach how a data center connectivity provider's sales teams can connect with leads on the right teams and at the right time. Next question up is, oh, by the way, if you're getting good value from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you hit the like button. Next question up, what do we got? This one has to do with lighting, illumination. One of the lower power use opportunities around a data center, but for sure it still adds up because of the 7/24/365 nature of data centers. So this question is, this challenge is, how does a data center lighting company improve marketing and sales to data center facilities? How does a company that's in the business of data center lighting improve its sales and marketing to data center facilities? So being in the lighting business for sure means that you're location specific, meaning that in order to be able to market and sell and install and maintain lighting, there at the minimum needs to be presence to do the installation and to do the maintenance, even if you're marketing and selling virtually. So what that means is when it comes to building your go-to-market across the full team, across marketing, sales, account management, installation, support, service, what have you, geography is certainly going to play a role with that. So we need to define our ideal client profile, and a great place to start would be to look at your case studies, to look at your logos on your website, to look into your CRM and see what your best clients have in common. Geographically, again, you're going to, when it comes to lighting, whether it's interior lighting, exterior lighting, or both, for sure, geographic coverage is going to definitely play a role in that. So define where they're located. Is it just within a certain metropolitan area? Is it within an entire state, within a certain province, within a group of provinces or states, within an entire country, within a group of countries? It's probably not global unless you're a huge company and you have massive global coverage through employees or channel partners, which would require not only massive coverage, but localization in a lot of different languages. So get really specific on geographically where your best clients are. Second, when you look at where you've been most successful, how big or how small are these enterprise data centers, are these data center operators? That's going to play a role as well, because national and global companies likely have certain requirements that may be particularly burdensome to relatively small data center lighting companies. It may be really hard for you to navigate around between legal issues, financial issues, compliance issues, certification issues, staffing issues, bond issues, whatever it is. And you may be better off working with a general contractor or some kind of integration firm where someone else has the lead on the account with these huge companies. Along the same lines, you may also be set up in such a way where it's just not cost effective for you to be able to sell directly to end user data centers or data center operators that are below a certain size, that can't afford your minimum purchase. They can't afford your minimum level of engagement. So get specific on the range of company sizes that are a good fit for your data center lighting company. What's too small and what's too big. And I would encourage you, if you're serious about running marketing and sales, to data center facilities executives that are in charge of transformation projects, LinkedIn is certainly going to play a role. So I would encourage you to standardize your size targeting based on the bands, the employee ranges that are popular throughout the LinkedIn platform, on LinkedIn Sales Navigator and LinkedIn Sales Navigator and Campaign Manager. Third, are there certain industries where you tend to win most often and industries where you never win at all? So get really, really clear on that, because that also will play a role in your sales and marketing and defining your ideal client profile. So now we've defined at a company level who are the best accounts that we want to go after. And from there, you should be able to build out a target account list of anywhere from a couple dozen, usually a few hundred, in some cases, a few thousand potential companies that fit that ideal client profile that you'd love to be buying data center lighting from you in the near future. So that's a finite list of companies that you want to create awareness for, that your marketing and sales team want to have awareness within, to educate and build trust with the right people in those companies around anything and everything having to do with data center lighting, data center illumination. Now that we've defined the company or the account level, we need to understand who the people are within those accounts that are going to care most. When you say data center facilities, that implies, as most people would surmise when it comes to data center lighting, that a facilities manager or facilities executive will likely take the lead. But depending on the size, there could also be electricians. If these are brand new facilities, there could be commissioning companies that are involved. There could be architects, designers that are involved. There could be maintenance folks that are involved. If the company is really focused on sustainability, there could be an ESG, environmental social governance expert, that wants to weigh in. If lighting is a really big expense that the company is trying to control, someone from finance may also be involved. However, you likely know, based on your existing client list, who are the most important economic stakeholders that show up on these decision committees. Now, the most important one would be your primary buyer persona. The second most important one would be a secondary buyer persona. And if you're relatively new to this kind of initiative, I would encourage you to pick your first most important, your second most important, and kind of put a pin in the rest, at least for now, because it's very easy to spread yourself too thin with marketing and sales if this is a relatively new initiative. If you've been doing this a while, maybe your segmentation strategy can successfully support 4 or 5 different kinds of stakeholders within these companies. And what tends to happen often too is there's channel partners or third parties that come into play besides the internal facilities managers. These could be someone at a general contractor. This could be an integrator. This could be a consultant. It could be an architect. Again, all of these depend on the nature of your business model, where you're located, who you're targeting. But once we've thought through and defined that ideal client profile of who we want to target at a company level, and we've built out a target account list, we need to define who are the people that matter most, that care the most about data center lighting, and we need to prioritize who they are. Then we need to understand what they care most about. What are their biggest goals individually, as a team and as a company, when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center lighting? And conversely, aside from their goals that are usually in their job description and their objectives and key results, what's frustrating them the most about data center lighting? What's their biggest challenges? What's stressing them out to no end when it comes to data center lighting? We need to get the consensus on their biggest goals and their biggest challenges in their own words, not what we think those words are, but what those words actually are. So we need to do our homework and do our research. So let's say, for example, a facilities manager is your primary, and we determined that an engineering director is your secondary. Well, for each of those, look at least 10 or 20 people and figure out the consensus on their biggest goals and challenges. So when it comes to our go-to-market strategy, creating amazingly impactful educational resources, educational events, we can really nail our relevancy. We can really give them a fantastic reason to want to spend time with members of your client-facing team, to learn from members of your client-facing team when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center lighting. So if we think about the self-driven journey, where typically 83% of their researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you in the room. You're typically only going to be involved in the final 17%. The only way left for us to earn our way in to the most impactful part of the buyer's journey when they're forming all their preferences about what they're going to do with data center lighting is we need to take our client-facing team members across marketing and sales and help them reposition and rebrand themselves so they show up more like teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, maybe even thought leaders, depending on how seasoned they are about anything and everything having to do with data center lighting, so that we earn our way in early and often and have a huge role in as many of those 28 touch points as possible throughout the full buyer's journey. And when we do that, we're going to meet the rest of the decision committee, because the stakeholders that initially decided that, oh yeah, I want to see this guide, I want to attend this event, are highly motivated to want to bring the rest of their team members with them, because it's a much lower risk ask at that point. Like, hey, who else should be reading this? Who else should be attending this? Who else should watch that? That's how you figure out who the other stakeholders are. That's how you are the ones that are helping to help them think through and plan and navigate this whole issue. That's how you have a dramatic impact on the solutions definition of how they evaluate all the competitive options throughout their full journey. This is how you stay on the short list. In many cases, this is how you cause your competitors to drop off the short list, because they're getting so much value from your client-facing team members. There's really no time or reason for them to spend much time learning from anyone else. So for a data center lighting company that wants to improve its marketing and sales to data center facilities, I would encourage you to get a lot more client-centric, really deeply understand what's going on in their world, not only when it comes to data center lighting, but all of the adjacent goals, all of the adjacent challenges that the most important people on these decision committees are navigating, and show up in a way that you're seen as an expert, so they're motivated to want to spend time with your company and specifically your client-facing team members, because they're learning so much from them. So that's my insights. That's the best practices on how a data center lighting company can improve its marketing and sales to data center facilities. And that brings us to our final question as we head down the home stretch on this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events like this, make sure that you subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that comes to your email inbox every Sunday by going to www.dcsmi.com. So what do we got for the final question? How does a data center connectivity and interconnection firm improve its growth rate? How can a company that provides data center connectivity and interconnection improve its growth rate? That is a terrific question. The challenging part is when it comes to growth rates, there's largely two wildly different approaches to this. If your company is venture backed, or if it's owned by private equity, your board of directors, your shareholders are largely in the driver's seat for what they consider an acceptable growth rate. And because of that, we know that when it comes to companies that are venture backed, that are private equity owned, there tends to be a obsessive pressure on being able to hit certain growth targets, because it's required for maintaining multiples, for shareholder confidence. If you're publicly traded, there's even more pressure around this. If your company is privately owned and or bootstrapped, and your shareholders don't come from like a venture capital private equity mindset, and it's more like employee owned or founder owned or something like that, then you'll have a different way of looking at growth rate. And perhaps your growth rate centers around benchmarks that you might see in a place like Inc. magazine. Like Inc. magazine for decades has ranked companies in dozens of different categories based on their 3-year growth rate of who's growing the fastest. And typically from like a marketing and sales perspective, any company that's growing more than 30% year over year at a certain level is considered growing incredibly aggressively. Companies below that, but again, it varies based on category. For connectivity and interconnection, publicly traded companies are going to have very different expectations than privately held, closely held companies when it comes to growth rates. So the first thing is to get aligned on what your growth rate historically has been the last 1, 2, 3 years and where you want it to be. And second is to make sure that you are realistically resourced to compete and win in data center connectivity and interconnection relative to other competitive options that are in the marketplace. At the end of the day, connectivity and interconnection can be a commoditized category. So if you really want to be able to earn profit margins that get you out of the commodity broker business as rapidly as possible, it's really important that your company build a strong brand, because that strong brand is over time going to lower your cost of acquisition. It's going to improve your lifetime value. It's going to improve all of your unit economics. A strong brand also tends to bleed over from prospects and clients over to being a strong employer brand as well. So it'll become easier to attract and retain the best and the brightest talent that helps to fuel all of your growth. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is when it comes to improving your growth rate is to first get aligned on where it's been historically, what you'd like it to be, and what mission, vision, values kind of decisions you're going to make that are lines that you're either prepared to cross or not prepared to cross. These are culture issues. Culture is really, really tightly intertwined with growth rate. Once you're aligned on what you're doing with growth rate and you figured out at a company level how this is going to be reflected in your culture, then we need to figure out what we're doing with our go-to-market to support that. And then it's some of the basic blocking and tackling, like defining your ideal client profile, like where your companies, where the clients that you want to sell to, who the ideal clients are, where they're located, how big or small their companies are, what industries they tend to be located in. And then within those accounts, who are the individual people that matter most, the buyer personas we want to prioritize. And have we validated that their buyer preferences have changed and reflect the digital self-driven buyer's journey? If they have, then we need to make sure that we're prepared to show up early and often as the be-all end-all experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center connectivity and interconnections. Within this part of data center technology, within this closely aligned business to data center telecommunications, it's also very, very common that in addition to having a direct sales force, they'll have an indirect sales force through channel partners. And depending on how sophisticated your channel partner model is, your playbook is, you may have multiple kinds of channel partners that you sell to, from distributors, master agents, managed service providers. So you'd potentially have a couple of different plans that would drive indirect growth in addition to direct growth. So that becomes a factor, as well as making sure that you're showing up early and often in a way that educates and builds trust with your all different kinds of channel partners that are important parts of your growth strategy for your data center connectivity and interconnection. Because remember, just like the people that you sell to directly, your channel partners have changed their buyer preferences as well. They also are spending the first 83% of their buyer's journey without sales contact. So we need to figure out a way to get your best and brightest to show up as teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, and trusted advisors when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center connectivity and interconnection, regardless of whether we're talking about buyer personas on the direct side or buyer personas on the indirect side, on the channel partnership side. And we need to recognize that doing this well gives your company a competitive advantage. Ignoring this and selling the same way that you've sold 10, 20, 30 years ago before the digital journey was the dominant buyer's journey, that really puts you very much potentially behind the eight ball and can be a really big competitive liability. And there's a lot of even marketplace trends that are strongly aligning with these big, big shifts in buyer preferences. How is your company adapting to all of that with its growth rate plans? So at the end of the day, for a data center connectivity and interconnection firm that's within the data center technology segment, that's closely aligned with data center telecommunications, that works with co-location providers, hyperscale providers, edge providers, modular providers, as well as other kinds of end user sites. If you really want to truly understand your growth rate, first get on the same page and align about what those growth rate plans are and what its impact is going to be on your culture and who you look to hire and retain going forward. And second, get aligned on the client-centric, the partner-centric part of being able to educate and build trust early and often to get you out of the commodity broker box as rapidly as possible, so you can earn industry leading margins, so you improve your unit economics, so you can focus on providing great value to your clients, so you can focus on attracting and retaining the best talent, the best channel partners, and give your company not only a great growth rate, but a high rate of profitability as well. So the one thing I haven't mentioned in this so far is looping in your CFO, looping in your investors, because joined at the hip with growth is growth at what cost? Margins. It's a rubber band, right? You're pulling on growth and you're pulling margins on the other side. Is it growth at all costs? Venture capital firms, private equity firms sometimes get a bad name for pushing that growth at the expense of hurting your margins. Ideally, you really want to be able to have both, but it's certainly a very different conversation around growth when you're looking at VC, PE backed, as opposed to closely held, founder-led, owner-led, employee-owned kind of environments. So that's what I would be thinking about when it comes to data center connectivity and interconnection and improving your growth rate, is not only getting aligned on what growth rate means for your sovereignty, for your stakeholders that are driving the strategic decisions of the business, but how this is going to be manifested when you go to market with your most important stakeholders that are sitting in your target accounts within your prioritized buyer personas that you want to and need to very badly educate and build trust with throughout their buyer's journey when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center connectivity and interconnection. So that's the final question that we'll be addressing in this week's data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A show. If you got good value from this week's show, then make sure that you hit the like button. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. Feel free to mention that you watched this show, and I'll be happy to be connected with you on LinkedIn. If you want to make sure that you stay up to date on upcoming educational events and resources like this, make sure that you're subscribed to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter. And if you have an idea for a topic, a question, or a challenge that you'd like to see us address in an upcoming episode, make sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching or listening to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. I wish you great success in growing your career, growing your team, and growing your business's impact on data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. We look forward to seeing you back next week. Take care now.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.